Ta-da, now you're given the option of which screen or window to use.
We don't know. Where does it say that?
Let's see, how about the tools with little camera? Cameraman. No, there.
Where?
Go way over that way? Is that the...
That's going to have our presenter notes.
Oh, just kidding.
So
that's your presentation?
I don't.
Yes. Go to that. Because what we'll do.
This one.
Yeah, and then hopefully we make everything automatically switch. If not, we'll.
All right. Whatever.
Oh, there you go.
Well, no, not really. Lauren, how did you do this before?
Okay. I'm gonna get out of your way.
That's fine. There we go.
You've got to go back to the other thing for a second and click share. I think
It says Google hanging there. It's a share.
It's sharing. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much.
Sure. This is hurting my neck. Down.
Yeah.
Okay. Sort of. And then sorry, I gotta find my mouse.
It's down. You go down.
Down. All right. Oh, are we doing it?
Yeah, you're gonna hide.
Hide this. That's okay. Did we do it?
I think we did.
And go to speaker notes. Cool. All right. Ow, that really hurt. Thank you. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm Jill Grzalski. This is Lauren Warner. We'll introduce ourselves a little bit more in a minute, but thank you for coming to our session. Why usability testing isn't a nice to have, it's a must have. Glad you guys could join us. A couple of things that we're going to cover today, who we are, what is testing, why do we test, running an MVT, it's an acronym that we made up, a minimum viable test, and then getting started with your MVT. We have some handouts for you guys that we'll talk about towards the end, so if you just want to hold on to those. So a little bit about who we are. Like I said, I'm Jill Grzalski. I'm a marketing strategist at Genuine, which I'll tell you about in a second. I focus a lot on personalization and testing and really understanding users at the beginning of a project. So doing user research for any client to understand wants, needs, helping to inform the building of personas and things like that.
So I'm Lauren Warner. I head up the user experience team at Genuine. So everything from collaborating with strategy through wireframes, design, and build.
We work at a company called Genuine. We're located in the South End. We are a digital agency bringing together creative and technology to really build experiences. Our hashtag is invent together. Not only are we being collaborative with each other in the office, but also very collaborative with our clients, making sure that that carries through all the way in our process to deliver the best end result for our clients. Dive in and talk a little bit about what is testing, and Lauren's going to talk about it.
So this quote by Don Norman from his book, The Design of Everyday Things, really sums up and gets at the heart of usability testing for us. So design is really an act of communication, which means having a deep understanding of the person with whom the designer is communicating. And what that really means is we don't design in a black hole. We really need to be talking to our users. And usability testing at its core is really simple. It's just making a series of tasks and talking to people and walking them through those tasks.
So a little bit about why do we test. I love including stats and presentations. Really, companies today are competing on experience. 73% of businesses cite that customer experience is a strategic priority, but only 1% are delivering an excellent experience. There's also another statistic that says by 2020, experience is really going to trump product and price in terms of how users are making their decisions. So focusing on the experience is really core, and users' expectations are continuing to rise. So it's really important to focus on that we're meeting users' needs and what they're looking to do. So how do we deliver the best experience? When we're thinking about building an experience, there's a huge process from discover to design, all these things, and we're bringing together a number of different team members, all of who have different expertise and are bringing different value to the table, which is great, and it gives us a lot of great ideas. But what it also does is lead to conflicting ideas. So everyone's going to put their stake in the ground and say, no, we definitely have to deliver this, or we have to deliver on that. And so it's certainly not a bad thing. It's great to have a ton of opinions, but at the end of the day, we have to arrive on one. Is it brings these team members together, and like I said, everyone sort of thinks that they're right, and we end up making a lot of assumptions. And we do a fair amount of user research at the beginning in terms of what are the stats saying, what do we see from the data for the experience as it's already existing, but we're still making assumptions, and different teams are coming with different mindsets. Sorry if these colors are hard to see, but design might be coming in and saying, I feel the experience needs to do this. Strategy, all the time we're coming in, we believe that the experience needs to do this. So we're all really making assumptions, and at the end of the day, we're not really talking to the user. So what do? We test. Because it's ultimately not about us. We can do all the research that we want, but if we're not having a conversation with the user, then we're not confirming that what we're delivering is what they need. So this is really the only way we can deliver the best possible experience for the customer.
All right. So talking about what and when do we test? So we test at different phases of the product life cycle. So in the research phase, we're really looking at how is the current experience performing. We can test that. We can test competitor sites. We can test kind of new formed ideas. In the define phase, we can start to do some card sorting around features and functionality. We can do IA tree tests. We can test our paper prototypes. Design phase, this is where we can really have our wireframes and designs and walk people through them. Develop, we can have our HTML, our prototypes, really looking at the micro interactions, how those are working for people. And then evaluate, we can obviously test the live site. We know our job is never done. We want to A/B test things. We want to do multivariate testing. And we think about these things on a spectrum of some things are lower fidelity versus higher fidelity as we go through the life cycle. But with increased time to market and this new emphasis on having the best customer experience, we know stakeholders want it all and they want it now, which means that we don't always have the time or the money to do the best test that we want to do or do all this research. But I would argue that even if you don't have the time, you're going to save time in the end because you're going to save time getting it right in development in later phases. And if you don't have the money, by building the right features in the beginning, you're going to save money developing features that nobody's going to use in the end. And also, there's some really great online testing tools that are really inexpensive that you can use to quickly and cheaply test. Brings us to keeping time and money and this customer experience in mind. It leads us to what we call minimum viable test or minimum viable testing. And by answering these 5 questions, we can really get up and running with a test very quickly. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through an example of a minimum viable test that we just recently did for a hospital website. And so we started off with, what are we going to test? And we really decided that we were going to focus on the design phase and test our wireframes. And that was really because we were going to get the most amount of feedback and the most data that we could use to quickly inform the rest of the project. And then we looked at what was our focus. We had gone through a strategy phase. We had outlined our success measures. We really knew which pages we wanted to focus on. So for this hospital website, we knew request an appointment was a really important piece. We made sure that that was part of what we tested. And we also focused on our personas and our jobs to be done, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then how we tested, we decided it would be easiest for us to do in-person moderated usability testing of our wireframes. So we were able to work with the hospital to get their patient advisory committee. So we got 5, 6 or so people, and we were able to go through and ask them these questions. And then we set a date and point in our process when we're going to test, and we decided that was between rounds of revision. So we didn't want to do anything that was too finalized that we couldn't really make an impact on. We wanted to do between round 1 and round 2. And then we discussed our findings. We really decided that we were going to discuss findings the day after we did the test, and we were going to involve the entire team. So that was everybody from strategy, UX, design, development, account manager, project manager. Everybody on the team was going to be involved in discussing these findings.
So we'll go into running an MVT, a little bit of what's involved in that. So at a high level, and there's sort of 3 steps in each of these, so we'll dive deeper. The first is planning what we're doing before the test. Then we'll talk a little bit about facilitating during the test, and then analyzing and implementing, ultimately taking all the results from the test and really applying those. So planning before the test, the 3 things are writing your tasks, recruiting participants, and picking the right tools. So in terms of writing your tasks, we really bring it back to the personas. So a lot of the time, during strategy, we're building our personas, we're thinking about their needs, their motivators, things like that, but we're also thinking about their jobs to be done. So ultimately what they're trying to accomplish when they come to the site. So here's an example for the hospital site that we were working on, and you can see in this statement, that's really her job to be done. She's a patient, and we had a number of different patients. She was a care seeker. So she's looking to find the right doctor that will perform her upcoming procedure. So that starts to inform the task that we want to write. So we put our personas to work here. We're keeping goals top of mind, ultimately what her goal is and what we're trying to get out of this test. Prioritizing our tasks and making sure that the test might end up being a little bit shorter than we anticipate. People run late, so we want to prioritize so we're getting all the information that we need. And then really trying to keep it short. Usually 10 to 15 tasks works out to about 45 minutes to complete. We want to be conscious of people's time. And it also helps us reduce the amount of data that we have to analyze at the end of the day.
So the next is recruiting participants. We could give a whole talk on screening and recruiting participants, but as this is a minimum viable test, we're really focused on getting creative, finding the right users. So we work on, for this example, we had the patient advisory committee. While these weren't the perfect users to get, they didn't represent everybody who would come to the website. It gave us a good sense of what we needed to change. We got some good feedback. But there are other ways: coffee shops, friends and family, social media, whatever works for you. The focus is not finding the perfect user that matches the persona. It's just getting a good sample size, because it's more important to test early and test often than spend all this time finding the right people. And then using incentives. If you're going to ask for more than 3 minutes from people, it's really important to give them some food, give them a gift card. Anything goes a long way. Their time is valuable. And then know your sample size. So this kind of chart up here is a good rule of thumb that we use. So depending on the phase that you're in, we do a different sample size. So we're in the design phase. We do 5 to 8 people. Generally, we try to get 8 because we know people don't show up. So we at least want 5. And that's kind of how we plan around what questions and what we're trying to get out of that. And then picking the right tool. There are a lot of tools out there. These are some that we just happen to use. You want to go to the next one? Mm-hmm. These are the ones that we use the most and find the most valuable. Optimal Workshop is really great. They have remote card sorting tools, tree test tools, first click test of design and wireframes. And then we love Silverback. There's a free version, and then there's a $40 license version. So it's a really easy to use recording tool that's helpful for us.
So next in the process, facilitating things that we're doing during the test. So there's setup and preparation, there's the taking notes aspect, and then the wrap-up piece of it. So for the setup and preparation, it's really important to start by creating a facilitator or moderator guide. First of all, that helps put everything into one document, prioritizing the tasks and things like that, but giving instructions, and it really allows you to tap into any team member that you have to serve as a facilitator or moderator. Having a pre-test is important, just getting some basic demographic and background information about users that can help you align your actual user tester with personas that you've developed in the past. Encourage users to think out loud. So when we're talking and giving instructions and setting up the test, this is really important because we want to hear how users are thinking about the tasks that they're given. We also want to make sure that we don't give them too many hints or leading questions really embrace that awkward silence and let them work through it. Continue to encourage people to think out loud, because then you're starting to understand how users are really navigating the site and how they're trying to accomplish their jobs to be done. And then also, don't forget to eat, because nobody likes a hangry moderator. Also, this goes back to the point about the awkward silence. People will feel dumb, you know, especially when you're put on the spot and you're like, all right, go do this task. There's a chance they might not get it right the first time. Just continue to make them feel comfortable. There's really no right answer. You're always continuing to get information, and there's no such thing as a bad test.
So taking notes. So we've done a variety of different ways that we've taken notes in the past. We did sort of paper and pen version. It was a nightmare to analyze the data and go back through what the moderator, what the note taker had documented. So we're moving toward this sort of format, and it really allows us to be all-inclusive. So anybody can observe and take notes in this format. We use Google Sheets. And then we can also kind of update on the fly and capture really measurable information. So you can see there's a column here with success and failure. So it's really important when you're writing your task to select a target for each of your tasks. You can have a couple different targets, but it's helpful for you when you're going through your test to notice, oh, 6 out of 7 people are really not completing this task. This is something that's a little bit more urgent. And then wrap up. So we recommend going through a post-test questionnaire. This helps gain some usability success measures. We do some more complex one. This one's really short. It's, did you feel you knew right away where to look? Sometimes, all the time, most of the time. So this really helps you to, again, get some quantitative data that you can layer in around the experience. Really important to thank people for their help. Give them a card, give them a way to reach out to you in case they have any other questions or feedback that comes up. Give them their incentives. So whether that's you're going to email it at the end of the day using like an Amazon gift card, or you want to give it to them right away, make sure that you get that done quickly. And then set up and prepare for the next test. Always build some buffer time in, whether you need to eat lunch or not. But it also helps you confer with your note taker and talk about any quick findings that you had, and prepare, reset your browser, reset your prototype to the first stage you want to test. And then analyzing and implementing. So for this, we have collaborative data review. Looks matter in your presentation format, and then applying those findings. So for the collaborative data review, may seem obvious, but it's important to involve the entire team. They might not have been in your sessions and observing, but it's still valuable to help have them come in and watch you go through the findings. Back to our earlier point on different people have different ideas on how to solve the problem or what's right for the user and the experience. This helps us kind of build consensus. We're all working toward the same goal. We're listening to the same users. Group findings by theme. This is one that we really think is important because it's our job to prioritize things for the people who are looking at our findings. So we really need to group things into themes. For this hospital website redesign, we were seeing some problems with people scrolling. We were seeing some mega menu issues, or how people were interacting with mega menus. And you can see the team kind of sorting things into participants into these areas. And the other thing we do is we prioritize certain with these little sticky dots on our sticky notes. And this really helps us determine, we can't fix everything, so we need to prioritize. This thing's critical to the experience. Going back to our request an appointment flow or form, that's something that's really high priority. If we're seeing a lot of people not completing that flow or struggling, that's something we really want to focus on.
The next part is looks matter. So really, when you're compiling your findings, knowing your audience, some people are super data heavy and they want to see charts and graphs and things like that. Others, want some visuals, want a lot of participant quotes. So knowing your audience can help you figure out the way that you need to format things. Also knowing that stakeholders oftentimes really just want snippets of information and they want to go through it pretty quickly, where your project sponsors, who've been working closely with you, really want to see the full results. So making sure that you have different levels of depth of information and knowing what people want to see. Highlighting the quantitative data is really important, and using participant quotes because it really does bring it back to the user, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Also, in terms of formatting, nobody wants to read a 30-page document in terms of your findings, so always making sure that you have a quick executive summary in terms of how you prioritize the task, ultimately what it means for the experience moving forward, and the impact that it's going to have on the project is important. If someone does want to read through the full set of findings, make sure you have that available, but definitely focus on the executive summary to make it short and sweet. Applying the findings, so Lauren had talked about prioritizing different findings in terms of how they're going to impact the experience. Really, again, it's always coming back to the user, what's their job to be done and how are we going to make this site successful for them. So making sure that we're taking the findings and applying the ones that will have the biggest impact on their experience. Really always answering the question, so what, not just presenting data for data's sake, but what does it mean for the experience? Why is this finding important? Make it clear what can be fixed now, what can go in the backlog. You know, we talked a little bit about time and money having an impact, and really preventing people from doing testing. We also want to make sure that the findings that we're gathering are applicable throughout and that we're continuing to iterate. So if we don't have the time to implement all of the findings and the changes that we need to make, let's prioritize the ones that we can do right now and then really create a backlog that we're going to continue to revisit and revamp the experience. And then sort problems in a way that is useful to the particular audience, and really just applying the findings that way. And yeah. So then getting started.
So I know we covered a lot very quickly, but what we wanted to do is help you get started with your minimum viable test. So we go to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So we created this workbook that we left for everyone. And this is some questions, the same ones we went over in our example, to help you get started and with your process. Because as you know, usability testing isn't a nice to have, it's a must have. So we want you to get started today.
Any questions? Oh, yeah.
And so your slide, you had an awesome table with some just example sizes,
Mm-hmm.
number of participants. I was wondering where you got that from.
This is just sort of our gut rule of thumb of, assembled from some other research. Nielsen Norman obviously does the sort of 5 for usability testing. We try to go 8, but it's kind of assembled from our best practices. Yep.
Clarify PostTest or
So for that one, it's more, if you're gonna run this kind of quick minimum viable test, even somebody who's not your target audience is gonna give you some sort of feedback on the system that you're working on and see some usability issues. So we're just saying it doesn't have to be the perfect, age range, audience persona that you need. And it's more important to try and get whoever you can to do your test. Do you want to add anything to that?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Perfect. Keep them coming.
So you mentioned so I really like the collaborative exercise to get a priority and speed up that analysis. So the folks who are they're obviously part of the project team. Will they have watched sessions and are they coming up with some of their own observations, or is it kind of a list that you're providing and then they're short?
It can be both. Sometimes we've had people there observing and just listening in. Sometimes we have them serve as the note takers, so not as the moderator, but as the note taker there. It really depends on their availability, but making sure that you provide the notes and the summaries individually for them to review beforehand. A lot of times too, it's just important to have them part of that conversation because they're really in direct contact with the client, so they might have heard something in a different conversation that they find pretty applicable as you're grouping. So any way that you can involve them is great. Yeah.
How's development fit in with all of this? So I understand that the results from going through these testing sessions can inform what ultimately ends up in the wireframes or the designs that are getting worked on by the development team. Do you find that including them in these testing sessions and sharing the results better informs them as to why we're building it a certain way or what not to do?
Definitely, I would say yes. We're trying to, it's tough because not everybody has the time or has the want to be involved in these sessions. So we ask them to come and sit in. I think it is definitely a piece that we touch on a little bit. So we showed what findings would look like more to a stakeholder audience. We're also doing what those findings look like to maybe a development audience. So that might be more of a spreadsheet where we're filtering findings by a component level, by a page level, and that helps us really look at how is this going to impact, this change going to impact features and builds. I think it's a really good point to start to think about when we're looking at low-hanging fruit. This finding that we just had, if we don't have development in the room, we can say, this finding is really low priority. How hard is it to fix? Like if it's also very quick to fix, maybe that, maybe we could just do it or not, or if it's low priority and high to fix, obviously we're gonna backlog that one and put that one phase. So having those conversations, if we don't have a developer in the room, makes it very difficult to prioritize and think about what's easy to fix or not.
Yeah, it also helps with just creative problem solving. If we're finding that there's an issue with scrolling or the presentation of something and having a developer in the room to think back to projects that they've worked on before and to creatively solve for an issue with the experience that, maybe doesn't take as much time or money. That it's important to have their ideas around that too, and really just to keep them informed throughout the whole process. Any other questions? Yeah.
So how often do you find what you're thinking about testing to be sort of dependent on other tools or artifacts? You mentioned like personas would be nice to have for tasks, or you actually need wireframes. So like, how does that impact when you're trying to focus in on just testing in a certain spot?
I would say we think about what we need, what questions we need answers, and then we try and quickly put a deliverable together to get at those questions. And sometimes it's going to be really rough, and sometimes it'll be more detailed. I think for this particular project, we knew it was a huge system. It was a hospital. There was a lot of users. We focused on just patients, not career seekers or doctors. We focused on patients, and we decided we were going to focus on wireframes to get the most impact. But it really depends on earlier in the phase, we did sort of a IA test because we really wanted to learn about how we should structure the navigation and what things to bucket. And that's a test that we ran at that phase because we really wanted to nail that piece of it. So it really depends on which phase in the project you have and what questions you need answered.
I work in higher ed, and we often skip that first piece, the research piece, to actually find out what we should be creating for the users, because the stakeholders think they're already convinced that they know what the students are looking for. Do you have any suggestion on how to, like, when you would, if you had only a limited amount of time to test, when you would prioritize the research versus the design piece to make sure you're creating the right thing for them?
Sure. Well, you're a strategist, so you're going to say, you always should have strategy. Sure. But I would say, she'd be like, no. But I would say I really find wireframe usability tests to be the most important one. If I'm going to do any of them, I can do that because I can show the navigation as well in that test. So I can get a lot of feedback on a lot of different things before I've moved into design and development. So that would be my recommendation.
I would agree with that because I think ultimately what it can do is it serves as its own form of research. So if you take the assumptions that stakeholders have and you form tasks around those to prove or disprove through the wireframe testing, I think that's a good way to structure it. But definitely still do the research. Yeah.
When you say wireframe testing, like what level of fidelity, like lines and boxes as opposed to placeholder graphics? That level?
So I would say, again, it depends on which phase. So we've done kind of paper prototypes, less informed. I like to have some real copy in there if I can, at least real headlines, because people are like, what is this Latin? I don't know. And sort of at least, this image is of the doctor, right? Something that they can at least make a connection with. But we've done a variety. It just depends. Sometimes, definitely the the patient audience we had needed something more fidelity. Some people can kind of make the leap that this is sort of a blueprint.
And also in your facilitator moderator guide, explain the wireframe
sure.
to them, and no matter what, people are gonna be like, yeah, I know what a wireframe is, and then you open it and they're like, why is there no imagery here? You're like, okay, well, you said you knew what it was, so let me explain it to you. And that just helps level set, but definitely having some guiding copy and showing some interaction, I think is important.
So I'm also in higher ed and specifically at Harvard, and one of the issues we actually had before some text is like a user coming to the school being like, this is not correct.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about doing like moderated testing for things like Talkmark or like one-click tests. Do you have any suggestions on best practices like work with the Lowhanging guys to kind of test run there versus a moderated panel?
So for Chalkmark, we generally use it actually more for designs and validating if things are clickable and they're clicking and they're seeing the button, they're seeing the state, they're kind of doing that, and sort of a little bit of qualitative around how does this design resonate with you. That's sort of more what we use Chalkmark for, honestly. For remote testing, we use usertesting.com, and it allows you to write your tasks out, and you can read them aloud and talk aloud, so you get a little bit more of that versus Chalkmark doesn't really give you the think aloud, which is a little bit difficult. We also have done remote, like using WebEx quick usability tests as well, but you really kind of need that thinking aloud piece.
Any other questions?
Yeah, before you go in and do a redesign, do you typically do like existing user surveys as well?
I think a lot of times we use the data from analytics to understand how the experience is performing. We don't necessarily need to focus too much on sort of what's the experience, say really forward thinking about what are people trying to accomplish in the new experience. Typically, I don't know if we've done existing.
So we did, for one client, we went, they have a conference every year, and we went to the conference and did like man on the street come usability test the existing site, and what would you expect to see on this product page, what's missing for you. So we have done that before. It's been very helpful for that kind of thing, especially key pages like we're gonna redesign the product page, what would you really want to be on there?
Any other questions?
The question in terms of how do you point out to stakeholders that what they're thinking are assumptions? Yeah, so you actually put a pin in that and say, you know what, this is a problem. You get them to say, we need to test this. And we have that situation.
Yeah.
You know, there's no problem with anything, it's fine.
Sure.
And we all know.
Yeah.
You need to look at this.
I think a lot of it comes from the upfront strategy and the research that you're doing, you know, validating it with industry statistics, and then again, coming back to the data and showing, I think that the numbers really do tell a story. And if you can show the impact that it's having on their overarching objectives and saying, we know that you want to get here and you might think that this is working, but what we're seeing is significant drop off or no interaction with different products and things like that. I think, you know, you can't really dispute the data at that point.
I think we also kind of hide the cost of usability testing in, you know, part of the process, and just go ahead and ask forgiveness and go ahead and do it. If we do it quickly in this MVT way, where we're only doing like 5 users and we're doing it really quickly, it doesn't cost a lot of time and money. So we kind of sneak it in and we say, look at these great results, and they're so happy to just at least see users and see quotes that they get on board.
I think you're good point about the data. See drop-offs on pages or
Yeah.
conversions that people say.
For sure. Yep.
In that case, would an A/B test be a good thing to run on an existing site?
Yeah, A/B and multivariate testing on any live site always provides a lot of information, whether you're testing copy, imagery, things like that, to show, you know, you made the assumption that this is what's driving users, let's put it up against something else, prove and disprove. It's definitely something, you know, we're talking a lot about pre-launch testing, but A/B and multivariate testing is something that should continuously be part of a routine so that you keep optimizing the site, because again, you're making assumptions that what you have up there today is going to be relevant for them 3 months from now. So continuing to make changes to the site so that content's not stale and that the experience remains best in class is definitely important. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys for attending. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And if you have any questions for us, you can come on up. I'll put our contact information up here. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
By contact information, I mean Twitter handle. Yeah, really? Totally fine.
We went through this a little fast. Too fast. Did it feel fast?
Making points.
Did it feel too fast?
Shut up.
You're in the auditorium.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to meet my friend Matt from Hillier?
Hi, sir. Do you have a question?
Yes, let's talk about testing.
Yeah.
How's it going?
I don't have the plaque.
Matt has
Are you guys gonna make
Extra
those?
handouts. We
Yes,
don't. There's
I
one
think.
right there that I don't think someone's using.
We will. You can email us. We'll send it to you. Just in case. I assume that they're making them all available. Although they might not. I got so nervous this morning that I didn't have it. I was like, oh, Share, if you want to, you can shoot me an email if they don't send it to you. Sure. Huh? Was it?
media, like where's the boomerangs, all this stuff. Instagram can't log
We were 19.
How do we do that?
What was that?
Back to the YouTube page. Just log out.
That's okay.
So this is my first time, so I'm just gonna act like I'm exactly the same way.